Thank you very much indeed, Clive. And I will start by opening the meeting in our traditional way with an ancient club bell. I'd like to start by welcoming everyone. I see we've gone on to 3 screens, so that's including the 28 people I cannot see at this moment. You are all most welcome. I'd particularly like to welcome our visitors, and here I need some help from Clive, particularly perhaps in identifying those people that are visiting us for the very first time. Clive, could you help me with that, please?
I'm going to start with one of our past presidents, Stephen Potter from Poole, who is joining the meeting for the first time since we've been on Zoom. Stephen, do you just want to unmute yourself just to say hello?
Yes, can I say a very warm welcome from the Rotary Club of Poole, where I now have the honour of being the honorary secretary for my sins, I think. It's lovely to see all of you again. We have Zoom meetings every week as well. We're at a stage where I'd like to learn from your knowledge and experiences, and it seems as though you've got a very good, well-organized meeting here. So I'm going to sit back and enjoy myself. So greetings to all of you that I remember so well, and thank you, President David. Thank you.
Thank you, Stephen.
Great to see you. Great to see you, Stephen. You certainly are no one to avoid work, are you? We really appreciate what you did for us when you were here, and I'm sure Poole will be appreciating it as well. And I trust you just emerged from that lake behind you, cool and refreshed from your swim. Yes, Clive, will we have others?
Yes, let's carry on. Arshad, would you like to unmute yourself and introduce yourself, please?
Hello, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Arshad Kamal Sethi. I am the president of Karachi Sunrise.
I think, are you perhaps one of the first presidents we've had visit us from Pakistan, Clive? I can't recall.
Yes, I think so.
You are most welcome, Arshad. And
thank you very much. Yeah.
Thank you for taking the time to attend.
It's an honor to speak with you, and I'm very happy to see all of you. I'm basically a yoga and meditation teacher, and also I give motivational lectures, and I have given my speeches to many Rotary clubs in Mexico, Brazil, and other countries. And I will invite you for my next lecture, which I am going to give on 17th of this month.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Please send me the details. Thank you. Can those who are there for the first time, they can just wave at me in case I missed you. I'm looking at my screens. Yes, Stephen Debs from Oxford Spires.
Hello, everybody. We're really delighted to be with you. We've always wanted to come and visit the Rotary Club of London, and this is our first time via Zoom.
Yeah. Delighted to see you. I'll move on to the next screen. Senya, have you visited us before? I can't remember. You may have done.
Yes, I have. Yes, I have. Recently, I haven't, but it's always a pleasure to come back and see you all. Hello,
good to
everyone.
see. Hello, Senya. Good to see you. Saida, would you like to introduce yourself, please?
Good evening, everyone. Greetings from Pakistan, Karachi, and I'm Community Service Chair of District 3271. This is my first time to be in your meeting. I was invited by PP Vijay.
Delighted to see you. Thank you.
I think we have a first-time visit from a member from Nakinda. Is that right? That's what they... Oh, okay, that's what the chat was saying. Okay. Okay, thanks very much indeed. Welcome to all visitors. Now I'd like to ask for reports from officers and committee chairs, but if I could start actually with first a report from Vasi Daniels, past President Vasi, who attended a virtual foundation appreciation meeting last week and represented the club. Vasi.
Yes, we can.
Thank you, President David. I attended the virtual District 1130 Foundation Appreciation Evening on Thursday, the 12th of November. It was a great evening. presented by Michael Hodge, Endowment Major Gift Advisor to Rotary Foundation. And the meeting was very well attended by 80 plus members. Brenda Kresny from California, trustee and former foundation chair, gave a very informative, interesting, and encouraging talk on the club's recognition within the foundation. There was some presentation of several awards to Rotary clubs for their various projects and achievements. And some clubs received more than one award. I'm very happy to say that our Rotary Club of London, along with 3 or 4 other clubs, received the highest award, the Award of Excellence for donations over £5,000 to the foundation. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Vasi. Perhaps we'll have a side of the certificate in due course. I'd also like, while you're on the screen, Vasi, to note, because it was spoken of last week, of your key role in our membership drive. And thank you for that as well, for being so many things to the club, including the representative at the virtual foundation appreciation meeting. Thank you.
Thank you, I appreciate that. Thank you.
Other officers' reports. We have a council meeting following, of course, but are there reports? Our Armin would like to speak.
Good afternoon, fellow Rotarians, President and guests. Just a brief report. I've spoken to Mary Buchanan towards the end of last week. John is making slow but steady progress, so all seems to be well there. Thank you.
Rima had said she would like to make a brief announcement, David.
Okay. Yeah.
Just a brief, yes, Rima.
Yeah. Hi, everyone. This is Rima from Petra Club, District 2452. I just wanted to share with you this weekend from the 12th till 14th of November, there was the conference for the Zone 20B and Zone 21, which was really a very well attended zone conference, and it did really talk about a lot of topics that you have included in your lectures, especially in the previous 2 weeks, which is about diversity and the inclusion of more than one culture. So I just wanted to mention that and to say it is really nice. And if any of you can attend it other times, that would be great. Thank you.
Thank you, Rima.
Thank you very much indeed. Thank you very much indeed, Rima. I will move on to actually charities. We are currently running support for a Beirut charity. And I just remind people, if they wish to donate to our charity of the month, as it were, that if they would be very kind and send a donation to the treasurer in support of the Beirut Rotary, really very wide-ranging. The Rotary clubs of Lebanon are supporting the rebirth of Beirut, and in particular, we're supporting a children's hospital there, as well as children's education through other channels. So please do consider what you can give through the club to support Beirut. Birthdays. All right, we have 2 birthdays, and I think they may both be in attendance today. Of course, I only have the one Rotary Club pen to give. But if I could present this to Chicago, whose birthday is on the 17th of November. Chicago, could we wish you a happy birthday?
Happy birthday.
I don't know where Chicago's gone. Happy birthday, Chicago.
Thank you.
And to Nakinda. This, of course, is a different pen. But it is a tradition when we meet in person to give a Rotary pen to those members attending the meeting. And we do hope to return to that tradition as soon as we can. So Nakinda, would you like to say hello?
Hi, thank you so much. That is wonderful. I look forward to receiving my pen that I will write with proudly. Thank you so much, everybody. My birthday is on Wednesday.
Thank you.
Thank you, Nikinda. I thought at some point we used to sing Happy Birthday when we were in the club, but do we have anybody who's very confident in their voice and would like to do a rendering of Happy Birthday? I thought not. We will move on. We also would like. I'd like to introduce. Well, I'd like us to congratulate one of our members, one of our honorary members, on their 73rd wedding anniversary, which is coming just in 4 days' time. And that is the wedding of our honorary member, Prince Philip, to a certain Elizabeth. Could we perhaps in our usual way congratulate Philip and Elizabeth on surviving 73 years of marriage? I don't know whether there's anybody else on the screen who's had that experience. It's unlikely. There are several of us working towards it, but I think it is an enormous achievement, particularly for one of our honorary members to have. Could we, I don't know, clap, find some way of celebrating? Because that leads me on then, and I hope that we have a few pictures or something to show of what the happy couple looked like 73 years ago in an upcoming newsletter. I'd like now, of course, to give our first toast, which is to the Queen. And if in this occasion I could make it the Queen and Royal Family, the Queen and Royal Family. I'd now like to introduce our speaker, Emeritus Professor David Wolfe. He's going to speak on Chernobyl, nuclear energy, what works and what doesn't. And those of you who can recall 34 years or so ago, 1986, when we had this devastating news of the explosion in Russia, in Chernobyl, and the impact it was having on the world as the radioactivity filtered all around the world. And we had deaths in the UK. We didn't have many deaths in Chernobyl, but there was a consequence of that explosion that I remember recalling in promotions I was doing in France in 1996. It was still a very, very impactful event. And we're now very pleased to have Professor David to talk to us about that subject. Professor David.
Thank you very much. I want to speak today, of course, about the dreadful accident at Chernobyl, which is located in northern Ukraine, close to the border with Russia and Belarus. But of course, they were all in the Soviet Union at the time of this accident. Now, building a nuclear bomb is pretty easy. You just get a few kilograms of uranium enriched to say 90% in the rare form or isotope of uranium, which is known as uranium-235. And any of us could make one that would destroy a fair part of London. It wouldn't be as big as Hiroshima probably, but would be a serious weapon nonetheless. The problem and the difficulty is getting the enriched uranium, and it is a very serious problem if you can't steal it. Stealing enriched uranium is most likely what a terrorist group would try to do. Stealing a weapon already constructed is much more difficult, as they have complicated codes to get them to explode. But building a nuclear reactor, on the other hand, is a major undertaking, a very serious industrial enterprise. Moreover, it cannot and absolutely cannot explode in the same way that a nuclear bomb can. Normal uranium is composed almost entirely of the stable form we call U-238, and that does not split into pieces or fission, as it is called. The fissionable isotope, U-235, is only 0.7% of the uranium one digs from the ground. And it takes a major industrial effort to get it up above the 90% level where it will explode. In a nuclear reactor, it is only slightly enriched to about 3 or 4%, extremely far from enough to make a bomb. So then the question is, what exploded at Chernobyl, the most serious nuclear accident ever on Earth? And so to begin to understand what happened, we need a few words about atoms so we can understand them. Now, I need my first slide. Okay. Atoms have a center or a nucleus, which we can see in the middle, which is surrounded by electrons, the E. The nucleus is very much smaller than the atom itself and much smaller than the picture, about 100,000 times smaller. And it
David, sorry to interrupt, but it has disappeared from the screen. It was there a moment ago. Now it's gone. The screen.
The nucleus itself contains these electrically charged particles called protons, and they are positively charged, and positive charges repel one another, but they are held together by a much stronger attractive force called the nuclear force. Atoms are generally neutral with the same number of positive protons as negative electrons around them. The number of protons is called the atomic number, and it determines the name of the element, so that an atom with 1 proton is called hydrogen. And if it has 6 protons, carbon, 8 protons is oxygen, and 92 protons is uranium. Now, to help separate the positively charged protons to reduce the electrical force that pushes them apart, there are other particles in the nucleus that have the same mass as protons, but are electrically neutral, and they are called, not surprisingly, neutrons. Nuclei with differing numbers of neutrons can exist in the nucleus of any element, and this makes varieties we call isotopes. Uranium has 92 protons, and most uranium has 146 neutrons as well, so that 92 protons, 146 neutrons, that makes 238 particles, and we call that uranium-238. A rare isotope has 92 protons, but only 143 neutrons, and we call that uranium-235, and this is unstable and splits into pieces. This splitting into pieces is called fission, a word we derive from the biological process in which cells split into pieces. In this diagram, now I'll come to the next slide. In this diagram, the lower number that you can see at the bottom is called the atomic number, and the upper number is the total number of particles, protons plus neutrons in the nucleus, and that's called the atomic weight.
David, sorry to interrupt again, but we've still got the original slide.
Oh my. I hope you can see
That's
that.
fine. That's fine, David.
Fine. Yeah. Okay. So the upper number again is the atomic number, and the lower number, and the upper number is the total number of particles. Now, all of us have a great need and use for electricity. Electricity is a form of energy, and we can only create energy from another form of energy. And we create electricity by turning a metal wheel inside a magnet, and that's a device called a generator. Turning the wheel, called a rotor, takes energy. And to get that energy, you can use water falling down over a dam, or you can boil water by burning coal or oil and using the steam, or you can make the steam from the energy due to the one physics formula that everyone seems to know, E equals mc squared. That energy is equal to the mass of an object multiplied by the square of the speed of light, which is a huge number. When this uranium-236, marked as an unstable nucleus, splits, some of the mass is lost and converted into energy. And it's one heck of a lot of energy, hugely much more than burning coal or oil. So it's very much more efficient in creating electricity. The heat energy boils water or some other liquid, and the steam turns the generator and generates electricity. And it's the most efficient way we have because the energy created in fission is so great. There have been at least 3 major accidents at nuclear power plants, by far the worst in Chernobyl in April 1986. But it's not a nuclear explosion, so what did blow up and cause such havoc? There were 4 reactors at Chernobyl, and number 4, which was the newest, is the one that exploded. It's a type of reactor used only in the Soviet Union called an RBMK, which is Russian for reactor big power channels. In English, we would call that a high power channel reactor. It was a boiling water reactor. It made steam from water to turn the generator rotor. There were a large number of problems with it. One of the worst and most obvious being that there was no shielding on top of it, as there are for all such reactors through the rest of the world. A little lesson in reactors, unfortunately. To repeat, the rare isotope of uranium U-235 fissions or splits into 2 smaller nuclei. The mass of these is less than the mass of the uranium, and the lost mass is in the form of energy. From the diagram, you can also see that there are neutrons released as well. So these neutrons, neutral particles, again, with the same mass as the proton, a basic component of all nuclei, heavier than hydrogen, they are very high energy. They're moving very rapidly. They need to get slowed down or moderated, to use the technical term, and then they are likely to be absorbed by another U-235 nucleus. And this forms, as you can see, U-236, which is highly unstable in fissions again. But because there is more than one neutron, these 3 slowed neutrons from the decay of one nucleus can cause 3 nuclei to fission. That makes 9 neutrons, each slowing and causing 9 fissions and 27 neutrons, and a rapidly increasing set of fissioning called the chain reaction takes place. But for a chain reaction to release enough energy to cause a tremendous nuclear explosion, the concentration of U-235 must be well over 90%. And since it occurs at 0.7%, a great deal of energy, of effort, is needed to refine enough to have enough of this rare isotope. This fissioning happens in times that are inconceivably fast for human beings. The amount of energy released in a fission is large compared to any chemical process, and this huge amount of energy released in a very short time is called an explosion. The first bomb ever used in war at Hiroshima had the equivalent explosive power of about 15,000 tons of TNT. The amount of enriched uranium in that bomb was about 64 kilograms, and that was an enormous amount. The actual amount of uranium that converted to energy and blew up was just 700 milligrams, 0.7 of 1 gram, about 1/7 of a 20-pence coin, and only slightly more than the mass of a butterfly. In the formula E equals mc squared, the square of the speed of light is a very big number. Today, unfortunately, there exist many thousands of such weapons, reaching up to millions of tons of TNT and explosive power. But again, because the concentration of U-235 in reactors is so low, generally about 3%, there is no possibility of such an explosion. In the crudest of weapons, the percentage would be at least 90%. A crucially important point for the fissioning process to take place in a reactor is that the fast-moving neutrons emitted in fission must be greatly slowed down or moderated in order to be captured by another such nucleus. And this is done using carbon, which is a light nucleus in terms of mass, and in the form of graphite. And there are lots of collisions between these fast neutrons and the carbon nuclei, which causes the neutrons to slow down. And the heat generated in fissioning generally goes to boil water, and that steam is used to drive the wheels in the electricity generator. There was more and different amounts of water used at Chernobyl to cool the reactor. This warm and non-radioactive water was then discharged into the local river, which supplied new cold water for cooling. The next problem that reactor designers have to face is how to control that there are not too many neutrons produced, causing too many fissions. Too many fissions make things too hot, and that would likely cause melting or some serious damage. To do this, the number of neutrons is reduced, and you do this by using material which absorbs or sucks up neutrons and removes them from the possibility of creating fission. One of the most common elements to do this is a light element called boron, which grabs them grabs the neutrons and adds them to form a stable isotope. But at Chernobyl, these rods were very badly designed because what mattered at Chernobyl was energy production, and safety was a very different second. At Chernobyl, that April of 1986, a test of reactor properties needed to be done, and it had been postponed for a long time because the need to generate electrical power and meet the high levels of output that were demanded by powerful officials in Moscow. And it needed to be finished before May Day 1986, of course, the big communist celebration. And there was a rush then on the 26th of April. The test was started and then delayed for many hours because electricity was needed in Kiev and the reactor could not be removed from electricity generation. The test was started again about midnight, but the reactor had been left in an unstable condition during this delay. And there was a major design fault with these RBMK reactors. These boron control rods had ends that were made out of graphite, not boron. And this was done so that when the rods were pulled out, a little part of the graphite ends would still be inside, and that would moderate neutrons and make the reactor yet more efficient. Efficiency, output, numbers, these were the things that mattered. Maintenance, safety, care, all of these were secondary conditions to production numbers. When the test began, the boron rods were withdrawn, the reactor was running. The test involved slowing the reaction down to see how the reactor could function at lower power output. So the boron control rods were inserted to slow down the fission process. But of course, the control rods had graphite tips. So when rods were inserted, the graphite tips came first, and that made yet more fissions, and the reaction got quickly out of control. The heat was immense, much more water boiled than necessary, and the steam occupies much more space than the water had. Hugely much more space and much more pressure than was available. That extra pressure blew the top of the reactor completely off. It was a big enough explosion to blow the roof off the building and to toss a 2 million kilogram concrete and lead top of the reactor up into the air. There was no cooling left, and all of the cooling water was now thrown into an incredibly hot reactor at about 2000 degrees Celsius. The immense heat melted the metal which enclosed the uranium fuel. This metal was made from a material from the element zirconium. Steam interacting with zirconium produces hydrogen gas. Hydrogen is a highly flammable gas, as anyone knows who has ever seen the video of the Hindenburg Zeppelin explode. And there was a huge amount of hydrogen produced. And it was this hydrogen that caused a second and much more massive explosion. And this second explosion destroyed most of the building itself. It tossed hot graphite blocks from the reactor into the air, along with some of the uranium and various radioactive elements from the fissioning process. Radioactive graphite landed all over the surrounding countryside. Much graphite caught fire, sending radioactive ash high into the sky to be distributed by the wind. Dangerous nuclei spewed into the night sky, high into the wind, floating mostly westward in vast quantities. All reactors, except for these RBMKs, have concrete containment vessels. They were considered too costly when these reactors were built. While it's not certain that such a vessel would have contained the explosion, it certainly would have helped and prevented much, if not all, of that radioactive material from escaping. I need to repeat that this incredible explosion was due to the buildup of steam pressure and hydrogen gas and was not and could never be a nuclear explosion. And there were, of course, nuclear explosions, I've already mentioned, and the first taking place on the 6th of August in 1945 in Hiroshima. From that explosion, about 75,000 people died instantly, and another 75,000 died shortly thereafter. Some 100,000 were injured. At Chernobyl, 2 people died instantly, both from steam burns, and 29 died of acute radiation illness in the next 3 months. It's estimated that about some 4,000 people, as the best, most accurate guess, would likely die from illnesses due to this disaster. But the special horror of this catastrophe was the release of radioactive material into the external environment. Yet it's important to understand that there was only about 5% of the total radioactivity in that reactor was released. The amount of radioactive material emitted in the explosion, the radioactive material, was about 500 times that at Hiroshima. Hiroshima was a bomb that exploded. Chernobyl was an accident that released radioactivity. 5% of the reactor material was enough to contaminate much of the continent up to Sweden, and of course, Welsh lamb, as we know. That's less than 200 kilograms that contaminated much of the continent. Had it all been released, it would have been enough to devastate Europe, killing most of the inhabitants and rendering the lands uninhabitable. There were 3 other reactors working at Chernobyl, and had those also exploded and released all of their radioactivity, there probably would not be any living organic organism left on Earth, which is quite the terrifying thought. There will be a lot of problems for a long time, however, and that was due to a terribly poorly designed reactor. In contrast, however, the burning of coal is responsible for over 800,000 premature deaths per year globally, and many millions of more serious and minor illnesses. In China alone, about 670,000 people die prematurely per year as a result of coal-related air pollution. Estimates in India are that coal contributes between 80 and 120,000 premature deaths annually. In the United States, coal kills about 13,000 people annually and 23,000 in Europe. The economic costs of the health impacts from coal conduction just in Europe are valued at about 70 billion US dollars per year. All of this is beside the crucial question of global warming due to the carbon dioxide released. This is to be compared with 4,000 deaths from Chernobyl. And remember that this explosion was due to grossly poorly designed reactors in the Soviet Union. But coal burning has been around for centuries, nuclear power for decades. Coal produces dust and smoke, which are visible, and nuclear reactors, if they explode, produce radioactive fallout, which is invisible. And the public does not understand nuclear energy, and there's obviously great fear for things one doesn't understand, either the benefits or the problems. As in so many things in life, better education would help a great deal. Ignorance is not an excuse, of course, but it is a severe problem. According to Benjamin Sovakul, a Danish professor of energy technology, there have been 279 major energy accidents in the century from 1907 to 2007, and they caused over 180,000 deaths with over $40 billion US dollars in property damage. That's in 100 years. In the nearly 70 years that nuclear reactors have been around, there have been 3 major energy accidents. However, by far the worst problem that results from energy generation by humanity is the creation of air pollution, the most lethal of which, particulate matter, which is primarily generated from the burning of fossil fuels, is estimated to cause between 2 and 4 million deaths annually, every year. In the future, the 2 greatest problems facing humanity are, in my opinion, climate change and nuclear annihilation. And these are the only 2 things that can destroy all of life on Earth. The latter problem, the bomb, is not one I've discussed, but the first one is the most crucial thing, I think, facing humanity. Can we produce enough electricity to meet the demand, particularly of countries whose economies and populations are growing? Renewable energy is growing, but in most countries, it's still a small part of the mix. Only in Denmark has it even passed 40% of total energy requirements. Wind, solar, biomass, wave power are used, but they are far from enough, and it is expected to be nearly a century before the Earth is powered completely by renewables. Given some of the small, better, and safer nuclear reactors that have been designed and built, it may well be necessary to use them for the next 100 years. I hope that was not too depressing, and thank you very much for letting me speak.
Thank you very much indeed, Professor Wolfe. We'd now like, if you're prepared, to invite the members to ask you some questions.
Of course.
And in a moment I will hand over to Clive, but there is one figure, I don't know whether you have this, but deaths per source like coal or nuclear is one thing, but this is all about energy. Do we have any information on deaths per therm? In other words, when we have a problem, do we get our benefit in terms of energy more from one or the other?
If I understand, the burning of coal kills people. We can see the temperature rise. We can see the melting of ice in both the Arctic and the Antarctic. These are disastrous problems. They will mean that coastal cities, New York, and so forth, will be underwater. I don't see any way except stopping burning coal and other fossil fuels, even oil and natural gas, which are better, but not great. I don't see any way to avoid this problem without stopping the use of fossil fuel. I'm not sure if that answers what you need. But.
Well, it does in a sense. So I was looking at the cost benefit argument in cost per death for the benefit per living.
Well,
but you're taking it to a different plane. So thank you, Clive. Would you
yes,
take
indeed.
over from me?
Can I just remind everybody, if you wish to ask a question, can you please unmute yourself? Several people have already done that. I'll be calling you in a moment, because then you will come to the top of my list. Or you can always use the reaction button and raise your hand. Just waving at me doesn't always work because I don't necessarily see you. So I'm going to start with Rydian Jones, then Tim War, then Rima Tentash, and then Nikki Scott, and then Nahid Berta. So Rydian, would you like to pose your question, please?
Thank you, Clive. David, an excellent and fascinating talk. Thank you. I'm very interested in the commercial possibilities of small modular nuclear reactors, which seem to me inherently much safer than ones which are built on a bespoke basis. Rolls-Royce, of course, makes nuclear reactors for the British submarine fleet, and their plan is to actually have lots of little reactors rather than one big one. What's your response to that approach?
I think that's an excellent approach, frankly. Small reactors are obviously less dangerous than big ones. The biggest reactors in much of the world have been around producing around 400 to 500 megawatts. The Soviets, whose major interest always seemed to be bigger and better, made these RBMK reactors, which were 1,000 megawatts. That is at least twice the size of any Western reactor. That's one of the reasons they were so big that they could not build a concrete structure over it, because it would be so huge that it would cost more than the reactor itself. These small reactors seem to be much safer, and there are even reactors that have been invented in South Africa, actually, that are called pebble bed reactors, which seem to be inherently much safer even than that. One of the side problems of reactors in general is that they produce byproducts, and one of the radioactive byproducts they produce is plutonium. And plutonium can be separated out, and it makes much more powerful bombs than uranium-235 does. That is a problem, and we can design around that. In fact, we can design around all of the problems. It's a question of money and finance in general, which is something completely beyond most physics professors, I can tell you. Otherwise, I would not have gone into this field, perhaps.
Thank you.
Clive, can I answer the next question then? Tim Waugh. David, thank you very much for that. It was very interesting. One of the problems that we hear in public opinion these days is the storage of nuclear waste. Can you say something about that? Because it does bring about a problem for a number of people when they talk about the nuclear reactor and the future of the nuclear industry.
Yes, that's a very good problem. And again, the handling of nuclear waste is largely a problem of finance and economics. The reason for storing nuclear waste and having to get rid of it is it's radioactive. And it's highly radioactive. And there are lots and lots of isotopes that are created in the fissioning process. The dangerous one in particular is, of course, plutonium. Now, there are other things, cesium and iodine and various other radioactive elements. The longest lived of those elements, if I exclude plutonium, is cesium, I believe, and that has a radioactive half-life of 31 years. You need to store material generally for 3 to 4 or 5 half-lives. So we're talking about storage of a century, maybe 2 centuries at most. Our understanding of geology is such that we have lots of places on Earth which are stable in the order of a century or 2. So we can have caves. There are caves in the southern part of New Mexico where the United States stores a lot of its nuclear waste. The problem is the plutonium. Plutonium has a half-life of about 35,000 years. So it's around for a very, very long time. And we don't know if there are stabilities, geographic and geological stabilities of that time. So we need to remove the plutonium and do something with it. But it is possible to make reactors that consume the plutonium itself rather than having it in the waste. And so we could have nuclear waste which does not have plutonium in it, and therefore we could store things for 100 years or 150 years, and that's really quite easy. So again, the problem is will, and part of the problem is economics, but it is highly solvable. It really is.
I will ask my question now.
Yes, please do.
I have two questions, in fact, for David, which I would like first to thank you for a nice lecture. The first question is what are the pros and cons for using the renewable energy, solar, wind, and water, to replace the nuclear energy? And there was a lot of talk about the effect on the environment, which I don't know what if somebody are saying that it's the COVID-19 is one of the outcomes of that. The second question was, I was a little bit confused about some countries are stopping their use of nuclear energy, and while others are still starting. So what is your point of view for that? Thank you.
Could you, I'm sorry, I was thinking about the COVID-19, which kind of boggled my mind. Could you repeat the second question, please?
Can you tell if nuclear energy is...
Yeah, the second question was that some countries are stopping their usage of nuclear energy and replacing it with renewables. However, others are still starting too. So what is your point of view for that?
Okay, the first thing, there are people who are claiming that nuclear energy or power is responsible for COVID.
This is what some said, that it was affecting the environment, the pollution. I meant its effects.
Oh my God. There are, to my shock, and you know, I'm over 80 years old, and so I'm not easily shocked by many things, but the cupidity, the ability of human beings to fool themselves or to relate things never ceases to amaze me. Sure. There is, I can guarantee you, to the very best of my knowledge, there is absolutely no connection between nuclear energy of any kind and any biological disease whatsoever. That just astonishes me. The stoppage of nuclear energy is an emotional reaction. Germany, I'm told, is going to all renewables. But remember, Denmark, as I tried to point out, which has the most use in the world of renewable energy, still produces only 40% of its electricity from renewables. That's very far from 100%. When we reach a situation in which people's lights go off at 1 p.m. in the afternoon because there's not enough electricity, I think all hell will be raised, and they will be more, be happier to have nuclear power producing. I think it is possible to have safe nuclear energy. It's not possible today, but it will be possible.
Thank you. Can I just say, Nikki Stone will be our next questioner, then Vasi, then Shikako, then Nahid.
Thank you very much, Professor. Thank you very much, Professor David. It's not the kind of question I think you're not expecting to be asked, but at what point would you seek spiritual guidance in matters of such importance to the human race and to our world? We're seeing fission and fusion and the future of energy. You pointed out correctly, when our lights go out, then you'll see we'll want to get the energy from anywhere at all. But that's my question. At what point do we seek spiritual guidance on matters of such importance to our world with fission and fusion?
I wish I knew how to answer such a question. Fusion has been, and I think rightly so, called the energy source of the future, and it always will be. It's been tried for now about 60 or 70 years, and it has never successfully been used. There is a massive project underway in France right now to build a fusion test reactor just to see whether or not the principle can be made to work. The problem is that you've got atoms at, well, the sun works on nuclear fusion. It is, and the sun is far away from us and is a massive device. Getting hydrogen at a temperature equivalent to what it would have to be near the center of the sun, which is some 30 million degrees, is an extraordinarily difficult problem. So I don't know, not in my lifetime is the answer to that. I don't know how to answer questions about spiritual guidance because they are outside the realm of physics. And basically, physics is damnably difficult. And I've spent over 50 years of my life teaching this subject, and over much longer even than that, thinking about it. And that pretty much occupies everything. I think we have a need for electricity. We have a need for energy, but we have had electricity for not even 200 years now. You know, electrical lights did not really begin to appear until about 1900. That's the blink of an eye in terms even of human history, to say nothing of the history on Earth. Yet in that time, we have managed to befoul much of our planet. And that, if anything, I would call a sin. And maybe by adopting pollution-free energy sources, we can atone a little bit for that sinful behavior.
Thank you. Darcy, your question, please.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Professor David. It was a very excellent talk. My question is, the Chernobyl and the Fukushima are both level 7 nuclear, they cause nuclear accidents. Which is far worse in view of radiation causing harm? Thank you.
Yeah, there had been 3 accidents. There was 3 Mile Island in Pennsylvania in the US, and of course Chernobyl and Fukushima. And by far, Chernobyl was much the worst of any of those accidents. And it was a result of a drastically poorly designed reactor. Fukushima was also an error in that it was built right on the seashore where it was, and it was exposed to tidal wave action, and it was known that such could happen. So it should not have occurred. And it did cause considerable damage, but it did not cause radioactive damage to an entire continent the way Chernobyl did to Europe.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Chicago, would you like to put your question, please?
Thank you, Professor David. I'm a Japanese. We have 2 bombs and Fukushima accident. So we know a little bit better than than anybody else. What happened to us. Obviously, I'm in UK, so I didn't really experience what happened in Fukushima in 2011. My question is similar to Tim. About the nuclear waste. I supposed to go to Onkara in Finland and Forsmark in Sweden this month, but because of the lockdown, I couldn't go. So I just ask you the question about what do you think about the final repository place? Is it really work? And then like Finland official said, that they could keep safe for 100,000 years. Do you think it's gonna happen? Thank you.
Well, the problem is the plutonium. And the problem with plutonium is not only is it radioactive forever and ever, but of course it can also be used to make nuclear weapons, as of course Japan is tragically aware. I mean, the Nagasaki bomb was a plutonium weapon. But plutonium can also be a fuel. And so reactors can be made so that when they produce plutonium, that plutonium gets consumed in the reaction process. So that there is, in the waste material, there will be absolutely no plutonium at all. So there will only be cesium and iodine and carbon and short-lived radioactive elements. But we need to design reactors, and some of those new small ones do this, that self-consume the plutonium so that there is none whatsoever in the waste. And waste can be stored for a century. That is not a problem. We do that with coal waste all the time. So I hope that will actually happen.
Thank you. Nahid, would you like to put your question, please?
Yes, thank you very much. It's a very interesting, complex, and difficult subject. Could I ask you, how do we know that, how can we tell that if nuclear energy is being used for peaceful energy making or for bombs, or like some country, they are saying they have got nuclear or producing uranium for energy, for electricity? How can we tell what they're using it for?
That's a marvelously good question. And the way we can tell is by inspection. And so we need to have the IAEA, the International Atomic Energy Association, part of the UN, has extraordinarily good inspectors and inspection protocols. The problem is they need access to the computers, and not every country has allowed that or makes that particularly easy. They install various apparatus to check, cameras and counters of various kinds. And all of this can again be handled. It can be done, but it needs the cooperation of every country in a proper way. Given how easy it is to make a nuclear weapon, it astonishes me that not more countries have such. And I can only be grateful for that. But the problem of using, say, the plutonium to create other nuclear weapons can be handled by the United Nations if inspection is properly allowed at the reactors.
Yeah, and
thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Professor David. That was very, very interesting indeed. May I ask you about India and China? Both of them are nuclear powers, but both of them seem to have industries which are major pollutants. Do they have plans to produce electricity by nuclear power, or have they already built nuclear power stations?
That's a good question. China is building, I'm not sure I have the number right, it's either 39 or 59 nuclear power plants. They seem to be, they obviously have dreadful pollution problems, as we can see in the news sometimes from these poor souls in Beijing. And remember, I pointed out how many people 670,000 people a year die in China from from pollution. That's an incredible number. And so they are, I know, they are building coal-fired power plants, but they are also building nuclear power plants, and a lot of them. India, I think, is doing that, but I'm not 100% sure of how many or how much of that is going on. But the growth, the desire for more electrical growth in so many countries, all over Africa, of course, and in Asia as well, is just enormous. And and as well as renewables, which help, I think these small, safer nuclear reactors would be very good. Again, remember, there have only been 3 accidents in 70 years. One of the problems is that people are afraid of things they don't understand. And physics is hard enough. Nuclear physics is much harder. And understanding how nuclear power works is a serious problem. I'm in the education business, and I think education is the key to so blasted many things in this world. Why we don't pay teachers enough money is just beyond me entirely. You know, I'm from a very different generation in which women had very few opportunities in this world, unfortunately, and they could be nurses or nurses or secretaries or teachers. And so the very smartest women, the best, most intelligent women became teachers. I had phenomenal teachers in school. I don't know that that happens anymore. And those same women are now executives in a high office. If we paid teachers £100,000 a year, we'd have an incredibly good education system. We wouldn't have so many problems.
Thank you. We're running out of time, but the next question, Harry Simmons, followed by Anthony Newton, and I think probably we'll have run out of time then. So Harry.
Thank you. David, you said there'd only been 3 accidents, but I'm sure I've heard of the odd accident in the UK as well over the years. Any comments?
Oh, yeah, no, I'm talking about major serious accidents. There have been problems with waste disposal and things of that sort. And that is, of course, true. But I'm talking about serious things such as the explosion at 3 Mile Island or Fukushima or Chernobyl. Yes, of course, there have been small accidents, but there have been, I would call those minor, in the same sense that there have been numerous minor accidents in normal electrical generation, whereas I've only talked about major accidents, the 279 or so number that I referred to, have been major accidents at coal-fired power plants. And so I'm comparing major accidents to major accidents, not smaller ones, although all accidents are, of course, bad and should be avoided wherever possible. Nature is such that accidents will never go away. And the use of technology is such that we will always have problems. But as someone who has, if you watch any TV drama from the Elizabethan era and you see how cold these fancy castles are, to say nothing about what a hovel for a peasant might be, our lives are so much better, and it's due to our technology and our ability to generate energy. So
thank you. Anthony Newton.
Thank you, David. Terrific. I'll come back to my vote of thanks. But it occurred to me, with your life's experience and deep involvement in physics, I wonder whether the course of time it's forced on you certain changes in your attitude to people, attitude to principles, things by which you lay great store by. And of course, the simple thing to say, to add is, does that leave you being optimistic or pessimistic about our future?
Oh my goodness. I think what has been reinforced over the years for me is education. It seems to me that the two major things in this world are health and education. And we need to emphasize in our society, and that means to adequately recompense people who are involved in those two professions. Certainly in the United States, where I got my education, people in the medical profession are paid really quite a bit. I don't think that's true in every country, but every country, medical people are paid better than teachers. And as I pointed out, the same women who were teachers in my era are now executives making hundreds of thousands of pounds. We have to pay teachers the right amount, and that need for education has only been reinforced in my life. I would like to be optimistic, but I am often very pessimistic about the future. The political situation in the world is not the happiest that has been in my lifetime. I was raised from an immigrant family and got to be a professor, which is a big jump. And that is part of what I think is called the Whiggish view of history. That is, there is progress involved, and we go from every generation is better. That, of course, is a delightful prospect, but it's not true. And I think we're seeing the reaction to that now. And I worry terribly much about the future of my children, and particularly of my grandchildren. And I hope and I hope and I hope that things will improve and get better.
Thank you. Unfortunately, I'm sorry for other people who might be waiting to ask the questions. We have run out of time. So President David, may I invite you to pass over to Anthony Newton for the official vote of thanks.
Thank you very much, past President Clive, and it gives me a great pleasure to ask Anthony if he would, on behalf of the club, give our vote of thanks. Thank you.
David, that was an astonishingly brilliant, very moving and very engrossing talk, and thank you for that. I have to say to everybody that this morning, when I had an exchange of emails with David and I wished him luck, he wrote the following words. I hope you'll excuse my quoting this, David. I think it's worthwhile. Physics erects a wall of fear around one and doesn't let one's information, understanding this, into one's own ears. I think that's very interesting, a very interesting quote. It reminds me really, when I was at school, we had a physics teacher who was absolutely appalling. The only thing I remember about physics was Bunsen burners. I still don't know what Bunsen burners are for, but I think that was an absolutely brilliant talk, David. It combines the best of what I call the 3 E's. Now, you're an educational man, so I would say erudition, education, and enthusiasm. You're wonderful. You've given a wonderfully inspiring talk to all of us, a deeply moving, inspiring, very personal talk to all of us. And I'd like to wish you, on behalf of the club, much luck and success with all your future endeavors into what you're doing. May it bring progress and development to all of us in the best possible sense. And please rid yourself of pessimism. May I ask everyone, please, to show their appreciation the usual way. Thank you.
Thank you. I am properly embarrassed, but it's the problems of nuclear weapons in particular are just dreadful and terrify me. I hope that the future we will be able to get rid of these horrible things and have a better and happier planet. And I wish you all the very best of health in these difficult times. Thank you again.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Anthony. Thank you, David. It just now best of me to present you with a speaker certificate for your talk. It will be sent to you across the ether in due course. Thank you so much for making it such a wonderful meeting for us today. I now need to move on to the close of the meeting. I have one or two notices. The next week's meeting is a special general meeting where the election results will be announced, and I like to remind people that they have until Friday to get their ballot papers, my members, they have until Friday to get their ballot papers into Julian. Julian, are you on screen? You're still expecting a few, aren't you?
Yes.
A lot or a few?
Well, we've had 50.
Sorry.
Can you hear me? Or not?
Sorry, yeah.
It keeps going back onto.
Yeah, now. Yeah.
Yes, I've got 54 so far, which is an excellent response. So hopefully there'll be one.
But to get to American levels, we need a few more. So please, yes, members, do send in your returns.
Yeah, mid-afternoon Friday is the cutoff.
Yeah. We have the speakers next week will be by arrangement with. Well, there'll be two contributions that I'm aware of at the moment. One will be a presentation from communications. The company communications committee, telling us about our current profile, and also from one or more new members who have yet to confirm, which Clive is helping me arrange. So that brings me to the final toast of the lunch, which is Rotary and peace the world over. So please raise your glasses, vessels, whatever you have to hand, and let us toast enthusiastically, particularly after what we've just heard. Rotary and peace.
Peace the world over.
Rotary and peace the world over.
The world
peace
over.
The world over.
Thank you. And with that, and with the bell, the ancient ringing, I think probably Indian source bell, I close the meeting.